It's another hot day in Chicago and another cold day in the NHL news cycle. Ever since Leo Carlsson signed his massive $18 million contract, not much has been happening around the league. And during this time, I've seen a lot of Blackhawks fans post a lot of lineup predictions, saying what the Hawks should do for this upcoming season, as well as posting some general season predictions of how they think the team will perform overall. Now, I really want to do that. I really want to have those conversations. However, I think it is way too early to be making those kind of statements and projections. There's still 2 months in between now and the regular season. A lot can change in that time. Granted, probably not much, but enough to, probably change your entire perspective of this Hawks team. But, all this talk has been generated around one single question of what are the Hawks going to do without Connor Bedard? And what is KD's plan to help us get through this? So let's look into that. Everyone's looking at it. Everyone's looking at the Hawks. And they're pointing out the glaring obvious, pointing out our problems, but the answer is always going to be easier said than done. Going into the summer, I had higher expectations for the Blackhawks than what has happened so far. I thought this team was going to look dramatically different than what we are looking at right now. It really feels like nothing has changed. And that's concerning for a lot of people. The conversation once the season ended was, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to go out, get that key piece that's going to completely change this team around and get us out of the basement. After the last game of the season, Blashill said to that locker room full of guys, we are not doing this next year. Meaning that they plan to play meaningful games in April. And Vlasic also confirmed that mentality as well. But looking at this roster, what is there to make me think that this team is going to be different than it was last year? Why should I believe that this team won't finish bottom 5? Now, if you know me personally or seen any of the previous videos, I'm very optimistic about this team, and I try to look at it glass half full. I'm very much someone who preaches this team is going to be better. Every player on the team gets more experience and they're going to be better for next year. But how reliable is that mentality? And how often can we rely on that before we're starting to sound crazy? Because it seems like that was last year's plan, and it also seems like that's this year's plan. Now, getting back to fixing it, there are a lot of holes in this roster. And looking at free agency, there's not really an answer. Patrick Kane is still available, and Anthony Mantha is still available. Adding those two players changes really nothing about this team, theoretically. But adding them isn't going to bring us out of the bottom 5 into a potential wildcard spot. It's just not. Again, Connor Bedard is supposed to miss about 10% of the regular season. If the Hawks were to make a move right now, they're not making that move to survive October. They're either looking to have someone play along Bedard or fill a role that needs to be filled. And there are a lot of missing pieces on this roster. This team needs a veteran center, more experience, more size, and a top 6 player. Now, you could pretty much lump that all into like a single issue. They just need a top performer on this team. But instead, it seems that the expectation is that they're going to rely on a lot of the young guys to make a giant step this year. It's pretty obvious that I am generally more supportive of KD than most people right now. So when I'm making it public that I have some concerns about the Hawks, I think that holds a lot more gravity about how concerned I am about it, if that makes any sense at all. We can look at this team and see a lot of missing pieces. I don't agree with making Bedard, Nazar, and Frundell your 1-2-3 centers. I think that not only spreads the talent too thin, but I think that center lineup is just way too inexperienced. I think Nazar or Frundell need to be swapped out for someone who has a little bit more experience playing center. Someone that could just take face-offs for this team. I think moving off of Mikheyev for Cole Smith was a big mistake. And there seems to be a lot of hope that players like Kanserov, Lardis, and more taking much bigger steps this year than they did last year. Now, granted, this is going to be every player's first chance at a full regular season. Now, when we talk about Kanserov, I personally believe he is going to be that player that we're looking for. But not on the level of like Robertson or Nyes, but I think he's going to be a lot more impactful than people are making it out to seem. But it also looks like it's a big gamble because we don't know what he looks like in the NHL. Just like with Bowen Byram, it's a gamble. Now, I could be completely wrong. That staff, that team, they're way more on top of it than I am. I'm not very much of a prospect guy. So I could be completely wrong come October. He could very much be that guy, but he also probably could not be. I don't know. But they're putting a lot of faith into this kid. Now, we're sitting here, we're complaining, we're nervous, we're worried, we have all these feelings about the Hawks going forward, and we're all concerned in some sort of way. And we all look to KD to make a change, and we all look to KD to point fingers at as well. But I would very much like to challenge the idea, is this really his fault? I completely understand why fans are frustrated. I get it. I will never disagree that there's a reason to be frustrated. The patience is wearing thin, but I think people are not aware enough of how lucky you have to be to have a complete successful rebuild. Before the regular season ended, it was like clearly laid out what the Hawks need to do, and everything looked like it was possible for us. And in just a short few months, everything that could go wrong absolutely did go wrong. The Hawks fell from 2nd to 4th in the NHL draft. There goes Stenberg. The Toronto Maple Leafs jumped from 5 to 1, completely changing the mentality of that team. Therefore, Nyes doesn't really seem like he's going anywhere. Trading for Byram is a risky move. Free agency has nothing available for us. And to top it all off, Connor Bedard is now hurt. We just cannot catch a break this offseason. Sometimes rebuilding isn't making the right decisions. Sometimes you need things to go your way. And it sucks that things aren't going our way in the most important moment in the rebuild. This is arguably the hardest part of the rebuild. How do you take all your assets and turn them into a producing team? How do you acquire the talent to support that team? It's a difficult job. I know everyone wants to blame Davidson, and I think some of the criticism is absolutely fair. Everyone wants to yell about picking Leshinov over Demidov. I get it. But there was a moment in that regular season before the draft that Leshinov did look like he was that number one defenseman. And I also think it's way too early to be this concerned about it. Defensemen take time. And to be honest, the fact that Leshinov was even playing a full season last year is actually remarkable for how young he is. Again, players like Makar and Schaefer, starting right away in the league is very rare for defensemen. Time will tell. I would give it a few more years before we could actually be like, yeah, that was the wrong move. But hindsight is 2020. You can look at Davidson's choices about getting Bowen Byram. Fair. You can be concerned about that. I'm not going to argue that. I've also seen the conversation about Frundell versus Martone. I think it's way too early to be having those conversations. Those guys have only played like 10 games in the NHL. And also, there's a lot of pointing fingers of like, why didn't you draft these guys? Like, Leshinov dropped to 5 and Martone dropped to 9. Like, there's a lot of other teams that passed up on those players. Hindsight is easy. You don't need to fire your GM every time a pick doesn't go your way. Because everyone knows KD generally drafts very well, especially outside of the first round, which is a much harder thing to do. I don't think there's much evidence to say that KD has failed. And I will always say this about this rebuild. The most unfortunate part about it is that Connor Bedard was essentially the first piece we acquired for it. He came in way too early. Yes, Nazar was drafted in the 2022 draft, but he didn't make his start until after Connor made his start. But it seems like every player, every high-quality prospect that we acquire has to play catch-up with Connor Bedard, a player who was also growing and developing himself. Connor's ahead of schedule. The rebuild isn't. And the supporting cast hasn't developed quickly enough. And without him, the team is in a much worse place. I don't think the problem that we have is effort. I think it's availability. The talent that we need is not available to us. Elite players are spread way too thin around the league, and now we're having conversations of adding in a 33rd team in Texas? Like, what's that going to do for the league? The asking prices are also way too high. Because of the growing cap and because of some players looking to get more money that they missed out on because of the cap not growing in previous years, it's just a really weird time to be in the NHL right now in contracts. And to top it all off, Chicago is just not a destination right now. And some players don't want to come here. Just because Larkin and Robertson and Nyes and Tom, like all these players are making them, Kachuk, all these players are making themselves available. And I see people on Twitter saying, Blackhawks, go get him. It's still their choice. What? Just because we can go get them doesn't mean they're going to come here. They have that option. There's a lot of no trade clauses that the Blackhawks have to weave their way around to convince those people to come here. And the odds are they're still not going to want to. Those players that are becoming available are in their prime and are looking to compete and win a Stanley Cup. Nyes is probably the only exception. That's why he seems like such the right person. He's so young and he's looking to establish himself with a roster. That's the one that just makes the most sense. So it seems KD has no choice but to rely on his young stars right now. And to be honest, I see why he wants to rely on them. They're high quality picks. Most of these players that we're talking about are first round picks, above 20 overall. Kanserov being the exception. Why wouldn't you want to roll the dice on those players? Oliver Moore is a player that everyone has high expectations for, considering where he was drafted. And he's honestly, for me, on my no trade list. Like, he's a player I think that we should not move off of. So give him that opportunity. This is going to be his first full season in the NHL. He only played 51 games last year, and previous to that season, he only played 9. And it seems people are starting to get a little impatient with him too. Like, come on. I did actually see one tweet, and I forget who tweeted it, and I am not going to be able to find it. But this actually makes a lot of sense in my eyes. If KD actually believes that this is the team that he needs to roll out, and he wants to put that much trust into these guys, why not extend them right now, right before they pop off? If he thinks these players are the solution for this year, sign them now. Because you expect them to go out and have really great seasons, and then they're going to come into the offseason and demand more money. Sign them now. I actually really agree with that. That's also a dangerous assumption to have, to think that's all just going to work out, you know? Because you could also sign these guys to contracts and they have terrible seasons, and now you're locked in with them. Maybe there's another move coming. Maybe this team surprises us. I don't know. But it seems like KD has a lot of faith in the young core, and that kind of concerns me. Only because we've seen how they performed in the past, and it doesn't look that good. But who knows? Maybe Frundell is going to have an amazing freshman year. Maybe Lardis, Renzel, Cancer, like all these guys actually figure it out. Crazier things have happened. That is absolutely true. Crazier things have happened. I feel like a broken record talking about these things. Like, I really do. But, I mean, what else can we do? Like, I genuinely look at this team. What else could they have done? Remove drafting players. Completely remove that from the equation. What else could they have done? Because I don't know. You can say, oh, they should have traded for Nyes. That was not a possibility. It's not a possibility. Some of these things people are saying that they should have done are just not options unless you want to dramatically change the layout of your team. I don't want to move off of Frundell in the 4th overall pick at the same time. Honestly, I'm kind of convinced that, you know, hate to say it, maybe I think Nazar should be a piece that we should trade away. It hurts to say, but you have to be able to give up someone that you really like in order to make change on this team. You have to make one of those hard decisions. There's a lot of things I'm telling myself to, you know, keep hope and remain hopeful and stay positive. But as things stand today, I don't think this roster is better than it was last year, considering that we're adding on the conversation of missing out on Connor Bedard. And all of this worries me the most. I really don't know how to end this video without sounding super negative, but those are just my thoughts, and that's just how I see things. But let me know. Do you agree with what KD has done? Do you not agree? Do you think this team is doomed? Do you think better things are ahead? There's a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of conversation to have about this team. But to be very honest, I'm generally looking forward to seeing this team in October, and I'm actually more excited to see how they're going to be in December. I'm just trying to remain optimistic and maybe hoping that they surprise us, you know? There's a lot of talent on this team. Like, there's no doubt about it. It's just we're not seeing them take that big step. And maybe that's more of a conversation about the developmental staff with the team. I don't know. I don't know much about that part either. I'm just saying the stuff that I do know. So, I don't know. This is just me going on a rant. It's just something fun to talk about, fun to speculate, fun to have kind of the conversation about it. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Okay, I think that's it. I don't know how to end this video. Bye.